Imagine you're holding a handful of salt. In front of you sits a small cup of water, clear, still, waiting. You pour the salt in. The water becomes undrinkable, bitter, harsh. You couldn't cook with it, wash with it, or drink it. That small amount of salt has overwhelmed everything. Now imagine taking that same handful of salt, the exact same amount, and walking to a river. A deep, wide river that's been flowing for thousands of years. You pour the salt in. What happens? The river keeps flowing. People downstream still draw water for cooking, washing, drinking. The salt dissolves into something so vast it becomes nothing. Not because the salt changed, but because the river has the capacity to hold it. This is the secret of love most of us never learned. When your heart is small like that cup, even tiny irritations become unbearable. Your partner forgets to call salt in the cup. They leave dishes in the sink. More salt. Soon you're drowning in bitterness, demanding they change. But when your heart becomes vast like that river, these same things don't destroy you anymore. The question isn't whether there will be salt. There will always be salt. The question is, how do you transform from a cup into a river? If you need to get comfortable, now's the time. Find a cozy spot. Let your shoulders drop. Let's begin. Here's what nobody tells you about relationships. The problem isn't that you don't love enough. The problem is that your heart hasn't learnt to expand yet. Think about the last time someone you loved did something that made you angry. Maybe they came home late without calling. Maybe they made a joke that landed wrong. Maybe they forgot something that mattered to you. What happened inside you? If you're honest, probably something like this. Your chest tightened. Your thoughts spiraled into stories about what this means. They don't respect me. They don't care. If they really loved me, they wouldn't have done that. And suddenly, this one small thing becomes evidence of everything wrong in the relationship. This is the small heart at work. The Buddha taught that we suffer not because life brings us difficulties, but because we haven't developed the capacity to hold those difficulties without breaking. It's like trying to carry groceries when your arms aren't strong enough. The problem isn't the groceries, it's the strength you haven't built yet. When your heart is small, you need everyone around you to behave perfectly. You need the conditions to be just right. You need your partner to anticipate your needs, read your mind, never make mistakes. And when they inevitably fail at this impossible task, you suffer. They suffer. The relationship becomes a minefield where everyone's walking on eggshells, terrified of pouring more salt into an already bitter cup. But here's the beautiful truth. Hearts can grow. Not someday. Not after you find the perfect partner or fix all your problems. Your heart can begin expanding right now, in this moment, with exactly the relationship you're in and exactly the person you are. A woman once told me she couldn't stand the way her husband chewed his food. This sound, this ordinary, human sound of eating, made her want to leave the dinner table. She knew it was ridiculous. She knew he wasn't doing anything wrong, but her heart was so small, so tight, that even this tiny irritation felt unbearable. What she didn't realize was that the chewing wasn't the real problem. Her heart had become constricted by years of unprocessed disappointments, unexpressed needs, and unexamined expectations. The chewing was just the salt. The real issue was the size of her cup. When we practice making our hearts larger, something miraculous happens. Not that our partners suddenly become perfect, not that all irritations disappear, but we discover we have room for imperfection. We find we can hold someone's humanness without collapsing under the weight of it. This is what the Buddhist teachings call developing capacity, and it starts with understanding one simple thing: love needs food. You wouldn't expect a plant to survive without water. You wouldn't be surprised if a fire died out when you stopped adding wood. Yet somehow we expect love to sustain itself on nothing. The Buddha taught that everything needs nourishment to live, even love, especially love. Think of love as a tree growing in your garden. When you first plant it, you tend it carefully. You water it daily. You protect it from harsh weather. You watch for signs of growth with excitement. But after a few years, you stop paying attention. You assume the tree can take care of itself now. You forget to water it during dry spells. You don't notice when pests start attacking the leaves. And then one day you look up and wonder why the tree is dying. This is what happens in most relationships. In the beginning, we're attentive. We notice everything about our partner, the way they laugh, the things that bring them joy, the small gestures that mean, "I'm thinking of you." We feed the love constantly through attention, care, curiosity, presence. But over time, we stop watering. We take each other for granted. We assume love will maintain itself through sheer force of commitment or history, or the fact that we once felt something strong. We let the daily habits of distraction and busyness choke out the tender shoots of connection. A man once came to Thich Hanh and said his marriage was falling apart. They'd been together 20 years and suddenly felt like strangers. The teacher asked him, "When was the last time you really looked at your wife? Not glanced at her while scrolling your phone, not saw her as she rushed past you in the hallway, but actually stopped, turned toward her fully, and looked?" The man couldn't remember. This is how love withers. Not through dramatic betrayals or explosive fights, but through the slow starvation of inattention. But here's what changes everything. When you learn to nourish your own happiness first, you become capable of truly nourishing someone else. You can't give water if your well is dry. You can't offer shade if you're a withering tree yourself. The practice begins with you, learning to feed your own joy, peace, and contentment. This isn't selfish. It's foundational. When you know how to generate a moment of happiness for yourself through a conscious breath, a mindful step, the simple pleasure of warm sunlight on your face, you have something real to offer. You become like a full cup that naturally overflows. Your happiness nourishes others, not because you're trying to, but because that's what fullness does. The Buddhist teachings talk about this as learning the art of happiness, not the pursuit of pleasure, which is fleeting and ultimately exhausting, but the cultivation of genuine joy that comes from being fully present to life as it is. Every moment is an opportunity to practice this art. Walking from your car to your front door, that's practice. Drinking your morning tea, that's practice. Washing dishes with awareness instead of rushing through them to get to something better, that's practice. And when you practice creating happiness for yourself, something shifts in your relationships. You stop demanding that your partner be responsible for your emotional state. You stop keeping score of who's making whom happy. You stop the exhausting cycle of looking outside yourself for what can only be generated within. A tree that's well-rooted and properly nourished can weather storms that would topple a weaker tree. A love that's fed daily through mindful attention can hold difficulties that would shatter a neglected love. So, ask yourself, what are you feeding your love today? Are you watering the tree or walking past it, expecting it to flourish on yesterday's rain? Let me tell you about the most common mistake people make when they say I love you. They think love is a feeling that just happens, like catching a cold or getting struck by lightning. One day you're fine, and the next day, boom, you're in love. And if that feeling fades, well, I guess the love must be gone. But the Buddha taught something radically different. He said that understanding is love's other name. If you don't understand, you can't love. Not really. Not in the way that heals and sustains and grows deeper over time. Think about it. You see someone across a room and feel attracted. Your heart races. You want to know them, be near them, maybe build a life with them. But do you love them? You can't. Not yet. Because you don't understand them. Love without understanding is like a house built on sand. It might look beautiful for a while, but the first storm will wash it away. Real love requires that you understand your partner's suffering, not just their personality quirks or their favorite foods or their childhood stories, though those matter too, but the deep suffering they carry, the wounds that haven't healed, the fears that wake them at 3 a.m, the ways they learned to protect themselves that now keep them isolated. A woman told me her husband was cold and distant. He never wanted to talk about feelings. He shut down every time she tried to have an emotional conversation. She was ready to leave. Then she learned something about his childhood. His father had punished him severely for crying, told him that showing emotion was weakness, that real men don't need to talk about their feelings. For 40 years, this man had been carrying the belief that his emotions were shameful, dangerous things that needed to be locked away. When she understood this, everything changed. Not that his behavior suddenly became easy to deal with, Not that she didn't still feel lonely sometimes, but she could see his silence differently now, not as rejection of her, but as a prison he'd been locked in since he was 5 years old. Understanding doesn't excuse harmful behavior. It doesn't mean you tolerate mistreatment or abandon your own needs, but it transforms the way you meet your partner's difficulties. When you understand the roots of someone's suffering, compassion arises naturally. You stop taking things so personally. You see that most of the time, people aren't trying to hurt you. They're trying to protect themselves from their own pain, often in clumsy, unskillful ways. The Buddha said the greatest gift you can give another person is to understand their suffering, not to fix it, not to explain it away or tell them they shouldn't feel that way, just to see it clearly and say, I understand. You're not alone in this. But here's the crucial part. Before you can understand someone else's suffering, you have to understand your own. Most of us are running from our own pain so fast, we barely know it's there. We stay busy, distracted, numbed out by screens and substances and endless activity. We don't want to look at the tight knot of fear in our chest or the old wound that never quite healed. And because we can't face our own suffering, we can't recognize it in others. We get angry when our partner is anxious, instead of seeing the scared child beneath the adult facade. We feel rejected when they withdraw, instead of recognizing the same protective mechanism we use ourselves. Understanding yourself is the beginning of understanding everyone else. When you've sat with your own loneliness, you recognize loneliness in your partner. When you've faced your own fear of abandonment, you can see when your partner is acting from that same fear. This is what the teachings mean when they say, understanding is the foundation of love. It's not an abstract concept. It's the actual practice of looking deeply, first into yourself, then into the person you love, and seeing clearly what is. And when you see clearly, love isn't something you have to force or manufacture or maintain through willpower. It arises naturally, the way flowers bloom when given sunlight and water. So how do you know if what you're experiencing is real love or just attachment masquerading as love? The Buddha gave us a clear way to recognize true love. It contains specific qualities: beauty, freshness, solidity, freedom, and peace. If these elements are missing, then whatever you're calling love is something else. Let's start with beauty. Not physical attractiveness, though that might be part of it, but the beauty of being truly seen and accepted. When you're in true love, you feel more yourself, not less. You feel more alive, not diminished. There's a beauty in being known completely and loved anyway, maybe even loved more, because of, not despite, your imperfections. Then there's freshness. True love doesn't grow stale. Even after years together, there's something alive and renewing about it. Not because every day is exciting or new, but because you're both continuing to grow, to reveal new layers, to surprise each other with depths not yet explored. Solidity is next. This is the feeling of having ground beneath your feet. You're not constantly anxious about whether your partner will still be there tomorrow. You're not performing or pretending or walking on eggshells. There's a reliability, a steadiness that allows you to relax into the relationship instead of bracing against its uncertainty. Freedom is perhaps the most misunderstood. Many people think love means losing freedom, giving up your independence, your individual desires, your separate self. But true love gives you more freedom, not less. You're free to be fully yourself, free to grow in your own direction, free from the prison of pretending to be someone you're not. And finally, peace. This doesn't mean the absence of conflict or challenge, but there's an underlying peace that comes from being in alignment with what's true. When you're together, there's a settledness in your nervous system. You can breathe more deeply. The constant internal chatter of anxiety quiets down. Now think about your own relationship. Or if you're not in one, think about a past relationship or the kind of love you're hoping to find. Does it have these qualities? If you're honest, you might realize that what you've been calling love has more to do with need than with these qualities. Need for security, need for validation, need to not be alone, need to prove something to yourself or others. There's a big difference between needing someone and loving them. When you need someone, you become possessive. You want to control them, keep them close, make sure they don't change in ways that threaten your security. You feel anxious when they're away. You read threat into innocent interactions. You can't celebrate their growth if it takes them in a direction you didn't anticipate. But when you truly love someone, you want them to be free. You want them to flourish, even if that flourishing changes the shape of your relationship. You trust that if you're meant to be together, that togetherness will be strong enough to hold your individual growth. And if you're not meant to be together, then clinging won't make it true anyway. A man once asked Thich Nhat, "How do I know if I'm truly in love or just attached?" The teacher said, "Ask yourself this question. Does this relationship make me feel more alive or more afraid?" That's the test. True love generates energy, creativity, openness, joy. It might be challenging sometimes, but the overall trajectory is toward more life, not less. You feel expanded by it, not contracted. Attachment generates fear, jealousy, possessiveness, exhaustion. You might feel intense emotions, but they drain you rather than nourish you. You feel smaller in it, not larger. Here's another way to recognize true love. It includes a feeling of deep joy that you are alive. Not just happy to be with this person, though that's part of it, but genuinely glad to be alive at all, in a body, in this world, with all its beauty and difficulty. When love is real, it connects you more deeply to life itself. You notice things you missed before. The way morning light falls across the kitchen table, the sound of rain on the roof, the simple miracle of breath moving through your body. Love makes you more present, more awake, more grateful for existence. If what you're calling love makes you feel more numb, more anxious, more disconnected from yourself and the world, that's not love yet. That's something else that needs attention and healing before it can become love. And here's the beautiful thing. You can learn to transform attachment into true love. You can take what's already there and, through practice and understanding, help it become something that contains all these qualities: beauty, freshness, solidity, freedom, peace. That's what we're learning to do together. Not to find perfect love somewhere out there, but to cultivate true love right here, starting with the love you have for yourself and extending outward to include everyone you meet. Because when your heart becomes vast like that river, there's room for everything: the salt and the sweetness, the difficulties and the joys, the human messiness, and the moments of startling grace. And that's when love stops being something you're desperately trying to get or keep, and starts being something you naturally are. The Buddha taught that real love contains 4 elements. Not 3, not 5, 4. And here's what most of us have been getting wrong our entire lives. We think love is just a feeling that shows up uninvited, like weather. We wait for it to arrive. We panic when it seems to fade. We have no idea how to cultivate it deliberately, skillfully, like a gardener tends a living thing. But love isn't just a feeling. It's a practice made of specific elements. When these 4 elements are present, what you have is genuine love, the kind that heals, transforms, and grows deeper over decades. When they're missing, what you have might feel intense, but it won't sustain you. It won't weather the inevitable storms. The 4 elements have Sanskrit names: Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upeksha. But don't let the ancient language intimidate you. These aren't abstract philosophical concepts. They're practical, livable qualities you can develop, starting today. Loving kindness, compassion, joy, equanimity. Let's explore each one, not as theory, but as something you can touch and taste and bring into your relationships right now. The first element is Maitri, which we translate as loving kindness. And the essence of loving kindness is devastatingly simple. It's the ability to offer happiness. Think about that for a moment. Not to demand happiness, not to extract it from someone else, but to generate it yourself and offer it freely, like sunshine. You can be the sunshine for another person. This is one of the most beautiful things the Buddha ever said. You, yes, you, with all your flaws and confusion and unfinished business, can be a source of warmth and light in someone else's life. But here's the part everyone misses. You can't offer what you don't have. If you're depleted, running on empty, barely surviving your own life, what exactly are you going to give? You'll try, of course. You'll push yourself to be there for your partner, to show up, to create happiness for them. But it will cost you everything. because you're drawing from an empty well. This is why the practice of loving kindness begins with you. Not selfishly, not in the way our culture talks about self-care, like it's a luxury or an indulgence, but as foundation, as necessity, as the only honest way forward. Build a home inside yourself by accepting yourself exactly as you are right now. Learn to love the person you've been running from your whole life. Learn to heal the parts of you that are still wounded and afraid. A woman once told me she spent 30 years trying to be enough for her partners. Thin enough, successful enough, interesting enough, sexually adventurous enough. She exhausted herself trying to become whatever she thought would make them stay. And they all left anyway. Not because she wasn't enough, but because she had no idea how to nourish her own happiness. So she was always demanding that they fill the emptiness inside her. She was like a person dying of thirst, expecting someone else to drink water for her. Everything shifted when she learned one practice. Every morning, before the day's demands crashed in, she would sit quietly for 10 minutes and create one moment of happiness for herself. Sometimes it was noticing her breath. Sometimes it was feeling the warmth of tea in her hands. Sometimes it was simply the small miracle of being alive in a body right now, with the capacity to feel anything at all. Sounds too simple, right? But watch what happens when you practice generating happiness for yourself. You stop being so desperate. You stop clinging to others like they're life rafts. You stop the exhausting pattern of looking outside yourself for what can only come from within. And when you've filled your own cup, when you've learned the art of nourishing your own joy and peace, you naturally overflow. You have something real to offer. Your presence becomes a gift instead of a demand. The Buddha said that learning to create moments of happiness is an art. It requires practice, attention, skill. You have to learn what truly nourishes you versus what just numbs you temporarily. Scrolling your phone for 3 hours doesn't create happiness. It creates numbness. But taking 10 minutes to sit in morning light, really feeling the warmth on your skin, that creates something real. Binge watching shows until 2 in the morning doesn't create happiness. It creates escape. But having a genuine conversation with someone you love, really listening, really being there, that creates connection. Buying things you don't need doesn't create happiness. It creates temporary distraction from emptiness. But walking slowly in nature, noticing the 1,000 shades of green, feeling your feet on the earth, that creates presence. You see the difference? True happiness isn't loud or flashy. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It's quiet, steady, solid, like good soil that can grow anything. And when you learn to generate this kind of happiness for yourself, you become capable of genuinely offering it to others. Not because you should, not because you're trying to be a good person, but because that's what naturally happens when a cup is full. It spills over. Try this today. Find one moment to create genuine happiness for yourself, not by doing something big or impressive, but by being fully present to something simple and real. Your breath moving in and out, sunlight through a window, the taste of water, the sound of birds, the feeling of your own aliveness. Just one moment, that's all. And then notice, when you fill yourself with genuine happiness, even for just one moment, don't you become a little more generous, a little more patient, a little more capable of offering warmth to the people around you? That's Maitri. That's loving kindness. That's being the sunshine for someone else because you've learned to generate your own light. The second element of true love is karuna, compassion. And we need to be very clear about what compassion actually means, because most of us have got it backwards. Compassion isn't just feeling bad for someone. It isn't pity or sympathy, or that hollow phrase, thoughts and prayers. Those things might make us feel like we're doing something, but they don't actually help. The Sanskrit word karuna means the capacity to understand suffering in yourself and in the other person, and then to transform it. Not just to share suffering, to transform it. Think about going to a doctor when you're sick. If the doctor just sits next to your bed and says, "I feel your pain," "I really do," how does that help? You need someone who understands what's causing your illness and knows how to heal it. This is what real compassion looks like in relationships. Your partner comes home and they're suffering. Maybe they're anxious about work. Maybe they're sad about something they can't quite name. Maybe they're angry and taking it out on small things that don't deserve their fury. What do? Most of us either try to fix it immediately. "Here's what you should do. Have you tried this? Just don't worry about it." Or we take it personally and get defensive. Neither response is compassionate. Compassion starts with understanding the roots of the suffering, not the surface story, but the deep roots. Why is this person really suffering right now? What old wound got triggered? What fear is underneath the anger? What need isn't being met? And here's the crucial part. Before you can understand someone else's suffering, you have to understand your own. If you've never sat with your own anxiety, really felt it without running away or numbing out, you won't recognize it when your partner is anxious. You'll just be annoyed that they're not being rational. If you've never faced your own shame, you won't see when your partner is acting from shame. You'll just think they're being difficult or withdrawn or oversensitive. But when you've done the work of understanding your own suffering, when you've looked deeply into your own fear and loneliness and hurt, you develop this extraordinary capacity to recognize it in others. And when you recognize it, something shifts. You stop taking things personally. You see that your partner's bad mood isn't about you. It's about the conversation they had with their mother that morning, the one that reopened a wound from childhood. You stop reacting defensively. You see that their criticism of you is actually their own self-criticism being projected outward because they haven't learned to face it directly yet. You stop the endless cycle of blame and counter-blame that destroys so many relationships. Let me tell you about a couple who came to our practice center in France. They'd been together 15 years and barely spoke anymore. Every conversation turned into an argument. Every argument reinforced their belief that the other person just didn't understand them. We taught them one practice. Every evening, they would sit together for 15 minutes. One person would speak about their suffering, not blaming the other person, just honestly sharing what hurt, while the other person just listened, really listened, without interrupting, without defending, without trying to fix anything. Just listened with the intention to understand. The first few times were terrible. The speaker couldn't get through 2 sentences without accusations. The listener couldn't stay present without their defenses rising up. But they kept practicing. And slowly, something remarkable happened. As each person felt truly heard, maybe for the first time in years, their suffering began to transform. Not because anything changed externally, but because suffering needs to be witnessed to begin healing. The husband discovered that his wife's constant criticism wasn't about him being inadequate. It was about her own father who never thought anything she did was good enough. She'd been unconsciously recreating that dynamic, trying to fix an old wound through their marriage. The wife discovered that her husband's emotional distance wasn't because he didn't love her. It was because he'd learned as a boy that showing emotion meant getting hurt. So he'd built walls so thick, even he couldn't find the door anymore. Understanding changed everything. Not that their problems disappeared. Not that suddenly everything was easy. But when you understand the roots of someone's suffering, you can help them heal instead of making it worse. This is what the Buddha meant when he said compassion is the capacity to remove and transform suffering. Your lover should be your healer, and you should be theirs. Not in the sense of having all the answers, not in the sense of fixing everything, but in the sense of understanding deeply enough that your very presence becomes medicine. When you truly understand someone, they feel less alone, and feeling less alone is the beginning of all healing. So the practice is this: look deeply into your own suffering first. Don't run from it. Don't numb it. Don't pretend it isn't there. Sit with it. Breathe with it. Get curious about where it came from and what it needs. And then, from that understanding, you'll naturally develop the capacity to sit with someone else's suffering without flinching, without needing to make it go away immediately, without taking it personally. That's compassion. That's karuna. That's the medicine your relationships have been starving for. The third element of true love is mudita, joy. And this might be the most misunderstood of all 4 elements. Joy isn't excitement. It isn't the adrenaline rush of new love or the dopamine hit of getting what you want. It isn't even happiness in the way we usually think about happiness. Joy is the capacity to be genuinely glad that life exists, that you exist, that this person you love exists, that right now, in this moment, you're both alive and sharing this brief, beautiful, strange experience of being human. When you know how to generate joy, it nourishes both you and the person you love. Your presence becomes an offering, like fresh air, or spring flowers, or bright blue sky. Not because you're performing happiness, not because you're faking positivity or pretending everything's fine when it isn't, but because you've learned to access the joy that's always available underneath all the noise and worry and suffering. Let me tell you what this looks like in practice. A man told me his wife was depressed. She'd been struggling for months, maybe years. Some days, she could barely get out of bed. He felt helpless, frustrated, sometimes angry that she couldn't just snap out of it. I asked him, "When was the last time you felt genuine joy?" He couldn't remember. He'd been so focused on his wife's suffering, so absorbed in trying to fix her depression, that he'd forgotten how to access his own aliveness. He'd become a mirror of her darkness instead of a lamp that could offer light. I told him to try something. Every morning, before dealing with anything else, spend 10 minutes doing something that brought him genuine joy. Not forced cheerfulness, not toxic positivity, but real, grounded joy. For him, it was playing guitar. He used to play every day before they had kids, before life got so heavy. So he started again, just 10 minutes each morning, nothing fancy, just playing the songs he loved. Something shifted. Not that his wife's depression magically lifted, but he stopped being part of the problem. He stopped dragging her down with his own unconscious resentment and exhaustion. He became a presence in the house that reminded her that joy was still possible, still accessible, even in the middle of suffering. This is what the Buddha meant when he taught that joy nourishes love. If there's no joy in your relationship, if you're just grinding through obligations, managing problems, keeping score of who's doing more, then it's not true love yet. It might be commitment, it might be duty, but it's not love that can sustain you for decades. Joy doesn't mean every moment is blissful. It means that underneath the inevitable difficulties, there's a current of gladness that you're in this together. You look at your partner across the breakfast table, still sleepy, hair sticking up, and you feel this quiet rush of happiness that they exist. That's joy. You're doing something mundane together, folding laundry, washing dishes, and you catch their eye and both smile for no reason except that you're here now, together. That's joy. You face a difficulty as a team instead of as adversaries. And even though the problem is real, there's satisfaction in having someone to face it with. That's joy. But here's the thing about joy. You can't manufacture it by force. You can't demand it from your partner or schedule it like an appointment. It arises naturally when you're present, when you're paying attention, when you've stopped long enough to actually see what's in front of you. Most of us are so busy trying to get somewhere else, better job, better house, better relationship, better version of ourselves, that we miss the joy available right now. The Buddha taught that joy comes from touching the present moment deeply, not thinking about it, not analyzing it, but actually being here, now, fully alive to what is. Try this. Next time you're with the person you love, stop for just 10 seconds. Don't do anything. Don't say anything. Just look at them. Really look. And let yourself feel grateful that this person exists, that you get to know them, that your life has intersected with theirs. That's joy. Simple, quiet, profound joy. And when you practice accessing this joy regularly, something beautiful happens. You become someone who lifts others up instead of weighing them down. Your presence becomes a gift. People feel lighter around you, not because you're forcing cheerfulness, but because you've remembered how to access the natural joy of being alive. If you're listening to this in the middle of the night, feeling alone, feeling like joy is impossible right now, I want you to know that joy is still there. It's in your next breath. It's in the fact that your heart is still beating. It's in the miracle that you're conscious, aware, capable of knowing that you're alive. You don't have to feel it right now. You just have to know it's there, waiting, like spring, waiting underneath frozen ground. The fourth element of true love is upeksha, equanimity. This might sound abstract, but it's actually the most radical and transformative element of all. Equanimity means there's no longer a boundary between you and the person you love. You are them, and they are you. Your suffering is their suffering. Your happiness is their happiness. Not in a codependent way where you lose yourself. Not in an unhealthy way where you can't tell where you end and they begin, but in a deep spiritual way where you recognize the fundamental interconnection between all things. The Buddha taught that the separation we feel between self and other is an illusion, a useful illusion sometimes, but an illusion nonetheless. In reality, we interare, we interexist with everything and everyone. Think about your body for a moment. You have 10 fingers on 2 hands. When your left hand hurts, does your right hand say that's your problem, not mine? Of course not. Your right hand immediately goes to help because they're both part of the same body. This is how true love works. When your partner suffers, you don't think that's their problem to deal with. Their suffering is your suffering because you're not actually separate beings trying to navigate life side by side. You're expressions of the same life force, temporarily appearing as 2 people. A woman told me about the moment she finally understood this. Her husband had been diagnosed with a serious illness. She was terrified, heartbroken, angry at the unfairness of it. For weeks she thought about what would happen to her if he died. How would she cope? What would her life become? How could she survive alone? Then one night, sitting beside his hospital bed, something shifted. She stopped thinking about herself entirely. She just felt his fear, his pain, his sadness about possibly leaving their children too soon. And in that moment, she realized his suffering was her suffering. Not because she was so empathetic or such a good wife, but because there actually was no real boundary between them. They were two waves in the same ocean, and what happened to one wave affected the whole ocean. This understanding didn't make the illness less devastating, but it changed how she met it. She stopped being so afraid for herself and became completely present to him. She stopped asking, "Why is this happening to us?" and started asking, "How can I help you suffer less?" That's equanimity. That's upeksha. That's the dissolution of the false boundary between self and other. But let's be clear about what this doesn't mean. It doesn't mean you lose yourself in the relationship. It doesn't mean you have no individual needs or boundaries or identity. It doesn't mean you tolerate mistreatment because there's no separation. The Buddha taught non-discrimination, not self-annihilation. You're still you. They're still them. But you recognize that underneath the surface appearances, you're part of the same flow of life. Think of it like two fingers on the same hand. The little finger doesn't have an inferiority complex, wishing it were as big as the thumb. The thumb doesn't have a superiority complex, demanding that all the other fingers obey it. Each finger has its own shape and function, but they collaborate perfectly because they're part of one hand. This is what relationships look like when equanimity is present. You're not competing with your partner about whose needs matter more. You're not keeping score of who's giving more or getting less. You're not caught in the endless game of me versus you. Instead, there's a natural collaboration. When they thrive, you thrive. When you suffer, they suffer. What helps one of you helps both of you. What harms one of you harms both of you. This understanding transforms everything. You stop having those bitter arguments about fairness. I did this, so you should do that. I sacrificed this, so you owe me that. That kind of transactional thinking disappears when you realize you're not actually separate entities negotiating a deal. You stop feeling jealous or threatened by your partner's growth. If they become happier, healthier, more fulfilled, that's not a threat to you. It's good for the whole system, which includes you. You stop the exhausting pattern of trying to change them into who you think they should be. You see that they're already complete, already whole, just expressing themselves in a different shape than you expected. A man once asked Thich Nhat Hanh, "How do I stop feeling separate from my wife? How do I develop this equanimity you're talking about?" The teacher said, "Look at her deeply and see that she is made of the same elements you are. Stars died so that both of you could exist. The same earth grew the food that became your bodies. The same air moves through both your lungs. You are not two separate things that happen to meet. You are two expressions of the same miraculous universe, becoming conscious of itself." When you see this, really see it, not just intellectually understand it, everything changes. Love stops being about getting your needs met. It stops being about finding someone to complete you. It becomes about recognizing that you were never actually separate, never actually incomplete, never actually alone. And from that recognition, love flows naturally, the way water flows downhill, the way flowers bloom in spring, the way your breath moves in and out without effort. This is the fourth element. This is what makes love true and lasting and capable of holding anything life brings. When all four elements are present, loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity, what you have isn't just a relationship. It's a sanctuary. It's a practice ground for becoming fully human. It's a place where suffering can be transformed and joy can multiply, and two people can discover they were never actually two at all. This is what the Buddha taught about love, not as romantic fantasy, not as impossible ideal, but as practical reality available to anyone willing to practice these four elements with patience and sincerity. And the beautiful thing is, you don't have to master all four elements at once. You just start where you are. Maybe today you practice generating one moment of joy. Tomorrow you practice understanding your own suffering a little better. Next week you remember to see your partner as not separate from you. Little by little, practice by practice, these elements become part of who you are, and your love transforms from something fragile and conditional into something vast and spacious and capable of holding the whole world. Here's the truth nobody wants to hear. You can't truly love another person until you've learned to love the one staring back at you in the mirror. I know, it sounds like a greeting card. It sounds like self-help cliché. But the Buddha taught this 2,500 years ago, and it's still the hardest lesson most of us ever face. We're so thirsty for love from outside ourselves, so desperate to find someone who will finally make us feel complete, worthy, enough. We spend years searching for that person, and when we find them, we pour all our unmet needs and unhealed wounds into their lap and wonder why they can't carry the weight. But love doesn't work that way. Before you can open your home to another person, you have to build a home inside yourself. Before you can offer warmth to someone else, you have to learn to generate your own fire. Before you can be a safe harbor for another heart, you have to become safe for yourself. This is where the real work begins. If you can't accept your body, you can't accept yourself. And if you can't accept yourself, you can't be at home with who you are. This sounds simple, but look at how you actually treat your body. You probably criticize it constantly. Too heavy, too thin, too old, too scarred, too different from the images you see everywhere telling you what beautiful is supposed to look like. You push it past exhaustion. You feed it things that make it sick. You ignore its signals until they become screaming pain. And then you wonder why you don't feel at home in your own life. The Buddha taught that your body is your home, not a house you're renting temporarily until you can upgrade to a better model. Your actual home, the only one you'll ever have in this lifetime. When you accept your body, truly accept it, not just tolerate it, something shifts. You can rest in your own skin. You can settle in, relax, feel joy and ease instead of constant war with yourself. A woman once told me she'd spent 40 years hating her body. She'd tried every diet, every exercise program, every promise that if she just changed this one thing, she'd finally be acceptable. Nothing worked. Or rather, everything worked temporarily and then failed, leaving her feeling worse than before. Then she learned one practice. Every morning before the self-criticism could start its daily assault, she would stand in front of the mirror and say, "This is my body today. This is the only body I have. It has carried me through everything I've survived. It deserves my respect." At first, she couldn't say it without crying. 40 years of self-hatred doesn't dissolve in a week. But she kept practicing. And slowly, so slowly, she almost didn't notice. The war inside her began to quiet. She stopped weighing herself 5 times a day. She stopped comparing herself to every woman she passed on the street. She stopped postponing her life until she finally looked the way she thought she should. She didn't suddenly love everything about her body, but she made peace with it. And peace turned out to be so much more valuable than the fantasy of perfection she'd been chasing her whole life. This is what the Buddha meant when he said, to accept yourself as you are. Not as resignation or giving up, but as the beginning of something real. You are a flower in the garden of humanity, not a rose trying to become a lily, not a daisy apologizing for not being an orchid, just your own unique expression of life, blooming in your own way. Every child is born knowing this. Watch a toddler. They're not worried about whether their belly is flat or their thighs are thin. They're just alive, joyfully occupying their body without apology. But somewhere along the way, we learn to be ashamed. We absorb thousands of messages telling us we're not enough as we are. That if we just buy this product, follow this program, achieve this look, then we'll finally be acceptable. These messages are lies. You don't need to be someone else. You don't need to wait until you're thinner, younger, more successful, more anything before you deserve love, including love from yourself. As you practice building a home in yourself, accepting yourself exactly as you are right now, you become more beautiful. Not because your appearance changes, though it might, but because you start radiating something that no amount of external perfection can create. The beauty of someone who is at peace with themselves. People feel this. They're drawn to it without knowing why. Because in a world where everyone is performing, pretending, exhausting themselves trying to be someone they're not, a person who is genuinely comfortable in their own skin is magnetic. So start today. Look at yourself, really look, and practice acceptance. Not fake positivity. Not pretending you have no insecurities or areas you'd like to improve. Just honest acceptance that this is who you are right now, and that's enough to begin with. Your body isn't the enemy. It's been carrying you through this whole complicated life. maybe it's time to thank it instead of attacking it. There's an emptiness inside most of us that we don't talk about. We feel it late at night, when the distractions finally stop. We feel it in the middle of a crowded room, surrounded by people who don't really see us. We feel it in the pause between one task and the next, before we can fill the space with more doing, more consuming, more anything, to avoid feeling that hollow ache. The Buddha called this a deep thirst, a longing for something we can't quite name. We don't know what we're searching for, but we know we haven't found it yet. So we look outside ourselves for the lid to our pot. We think, if I could just find the right person, the right job, the right house, the right life, then this emptiness would finally be filled. We check our email 20 times a day, hoping for the message that will change everything. We scroll through social media, looking for the connection that will make us feel less alone. We jump from relationship to relationship, convinced that the next person will be the one who completes us. But here's what nobody tells you. The emptiness isn't a problem to be solved by finding something outside yourself. It's a signal that you haven't yet learned to come home to who you are. A man told me he spent 15 years in a pattern he couldn't break. He'd meet someone and feel this rush of excitement. Finally, this is the one. For a few months, everything would be intense and consuming. He'd think about her constantly, need to be with her constantly, feel like he couldn't breathe when they were apart. Then the intensity would fade. He'd start noticing her flaws, her limitations, all the ways she couldn't fill the emptiness inside him. And he'd feel that familiar restlessness. Maybe she's not the one after all. Maybe the real one is still out there somewhere. So he'd leave and start the cycle again. What he didn't understand was that he was addicted to the intensity, not experiencing love. The rush of new romance temporarily distracted him from his own emptiness, made him feel alive in a way he couldn't create for himself. But it was like using someone else's energy to charge his battery instead of learning to generate his own power. The Buddha taught that when we feel empty, we haven't yet learned to take refuge in ourselves. We're looking for someone else to lean on, someone else's attention to make us feel real, someone else's love to prove we're worthy. But here's the devastating truth. No one else can fill your emptiness. They can distract you from it temporarily. They can help you forget it for a while. But eventually you'll be alone with yourself again. And the emptiness will still be there, maybe even bigger now, because you've been running from it instead of learning to be with it. So what's the alternative? You turn toward the emptiness instead of away from it. You stop trying to fill it and start trying to understand it. What is this feeling really? Where does it come from? What does it need? When you look deeply, not running away, not numbing out, not immediately reaching for a distraction, you start to see something unexpected. The emptiness isn't actually empty. It's full of unprocessed grief, unmet needs, unspoken longings, parts of yourself you've been rejecting for so long, you forgot they were there. A woman discovered this after her third divorce. Instead of immediately looking for someone new, she forced herself to sit with the loneliness she'd been running from her entire adult life. At first, it was unbearable. She'd never felt so alone. But she stayed with it, breathing through the discomfort, not trying to make it go away. And gradually, she started to hear what the loneliness was trying to tell her. She was lonely for herself, for the parts of herself she'd abandoned to fit into relationships, for the dreams she'd postponed waiting for someone else to validate them, for the woman she'd never allowed herself to be, because she was so busy trying to be what others needed. When she finally understood this, everything changed. Not that she stopped wanting connection. We're human. We need each other. But she stopped looking for someone else to complete her and started completing herself. She learned to generate the energy of mindfulness to take care of herself. She learned to sit with her suffering without needing someone else to fix it. She learned that she could be her own refuge, her own source of comfort, her own best friend. And then, only then, was she ready for a real relationship. Not one based on need and emptiness, but one based on fullness and choice. Not looking for a lid to cover her pot, but inviting another whole person to walk beside her as she walked beside them. This is the work you have to do before you can truly love someone else. You have to reconcile with yourself. You have to stop running from your own company. You have to become someone you can live with, even when nobody else is around. It's hard work, maybe the hardest work there is, but it's also the most important, because until you do it, you'll keep using relationships as distractions from yourself instead of genuine connections between two whole people. The Buddha taught a practice called metta meditation, loving kindness meditation. And it doesn't start with loving other people. It starts with you. This surprises people. They think spiritual practice means being selfless, putting others first, forgetting about yourself in service of something higher. But the Buddha knew something crucial. You can't give water from an empty well. You can't offer love you haven't learned to generate for yourself. Loving kindness meditation is like digging deep into the ground until you reach the purest water. You look deeply into yourself, all the way down past the surface personality, past the roles you play, past the stories you tell yourself about who you are, until insight arises and love flows naturally to the surface. But most of us have never looked that deeply into ourselves. We're afraid of what we'll find down there. So we stay on the surface, skimming along, never quite touching the depth of our own being. And we wonder why our love feels shallow, why our relationships don't nourish us, why we keep ending up thirsty, no matter how many connections we make. A woman told me she couldn't do loving kindness practice because she hated herself too much. How could she possibly say, "May I be happy," when she didn't believe she deserved happiness? How could she wish herself peace when she was at war with everything she was? I told her that's exactly why she needed the practice. The self-hatred wasn't the truth about her. It was just a very old, very tired story she'd been telling herself for so long she thought it was real. We practiced together, May I be at peace. May I be free from suffering. May I be safe. May I be happy. At first, the words felt like lies. Every cell in her body wanted to reject them, but she kept practicing, day after day, speaking these wishes to herself, even when she didn't believe them. And slowly, so slowly, something began to shift. Not that she suddenly loved herself perfectly, but she started to see herself more clearly. She saw how much peace she already had in small moments. She saw how much suffering she was carrying that wasn't hers to carry. She saw how much anxiety and fear were just habits, not truth. She saw the seeds of joy in herself that had been waiting for water all this time. This is what happens when you practice looking deeply into yourself with kindness instead of judgment. You start to see your complexes clearly. The inferiority complex that tells you everyone else is better than you. The superiority complex that tells you you're above others and they need to meet your standards. Even the equality complex, the constant comparison that says, I'm as good as them. I deserve what they have. All of these are forms of suffering. All of them come from believing in a separate self that can be measured against other separate selves. But when you dig deep enough, you find something underneath all the complexes and stories and judgments. You find awareness itself, simple, clear, without agenda or story. You find that you're not actually the small, separate, inadequate or superior person you thought you were. You're something much vaster, part of the whole web of life, temporarily appearing in this particular form. From that recognition, love arises naturally, not as something you have to force or manufacture, but as the natural state of a mind that sees clearly. The practice is to keep digging, keep looking deeply into yourself with patience and honesty. Don't turn away from what you find, neither the difficult parts nor the beautiful parts. Just keep digging until you reach that pure water of understanding and love. And when you find it in yourself, you'll be able to recognize it in everyone else too, because it's the same water, the same source, the same life, expressing itself through different forms. Here's some good news. You're going to make mistakes. Many mistakes. Probably today. Definitely this week, certainly for the rest of your life. And that's not a problem. That's how learning happens. The Buddha taught that without making mistakes, there's no way to learn. If you could do everything perfectly from the beginning, you'd never grow, never deepen, never discover anything new about yourself or the world. So the question isn't how to avoid mistakes. The question is how to transform mistakes into wisdom. Think of it this way. Garbage can become flowers. If you know how to compost, all your kitchen scraps and yard waste turn into rich soil that grows beautiful things. But if you don't know how to compost, garbage just stays garbage, piling up, creating more and more mess. Your mistakes are the same way. A man told me he'd said something cruel to his wife. in anger. Not physically violent, but words that cut deep, words designed to hurt because he was hurting and wanted her to feel it too. Immediately after, he felt terrible. He apologized, but the damage was done. He could see the wound in her eyes, the way she pulled back from him, the trust that had been cracked. For weeks, he was stuck in guilt and shame. What kind of person says things like that to someone they love? He kept replaying the moment, wishing he could take it back, hating himself for his lack of control. I asked him, "Are you learning anything from this?" He stopped. He hadn't thought about it that way. He'd been so busy hating himself for the mistake that he hadn't tried to understand it. So we looked together. What was actually happening in the moment before he said those words? He'd felt scared. His wife had said something that triggered an old wound, his mother's constant disappointment in him as a child. Instead of recognizing the fear and sitting with it, he'd lashed out to avoid feeling vulnerable. Understanding this changed everything. The mistake wasn't random cruelty, it was unskillful protection of an old wound. Once he saw this clearly, he could learn from it. Now, when he feels that particular fear rising, he recognizes it. He can take a breath instead of immediately reacting. He can tell his wife, "I'm feeling triggered right now. I need a moment," instead of attacking her. The mistake became compost. It turned into wisdom he could use for the rest of his life. This is what the Buddha meant when he said to think of behavior in terms of skillfulness rather than good and bad. You're not a bad person when you make mistakes. You're an unskilled person learning to be more skillful. Goodwill isn't enough. You can love someone deeply and still hurt them if you don't have the skills to express that love wisely. You can mean well and still cause suffering if you don't understand how your words and actions land on someone else. But skills can be learned. That's the beautiful thing. Walking mindfully is a skill. Eating with awareness is a skill. Breathing consciously when you're angry is a skill. Speaking truthfully without cruelty is a skill. Listening deeply without defending is a skill. Every moment is an opportunity to practice these skills. And every mistake is an opportunity to see where you're still unskillful and need more practice. So when you mess up, and you will, don't waste the opportunity by drowning in guilt or shame. Look clearly at what happened. Understand the roots of the unskillful behavior. See what you can learn, and practice doing better next time. That's how you transform garbage into flowers. That's how mistakes become the fertilizer for your growth, instead of the poison that keeps you stuck. Once you know how to come home to yourself, you can open your home to other people. Not before. If you're still running from yourself, still trying to fill your emptiness with someone else's presence, still convinced you need another person to complete you, you don't have a home to share yet. You have a desperate need dressed up as love. But when you've done the work of building a home inside yourself, When you've learned to generate your own happiness, sit with your own suffering, become your own refuge, then you have something real to offer. A woman told me she used to open her door to anyone who knocked. She was so desperate not to be alone that she'd let people into her life who didn't respect her, didn't see her, didn't even particularly like her. She thought having someone, anyone, was better than having no one. It took years of painful relationships before she learned to close the door. Not to lock it forever, but to be selective about who she invited in. She spent a year alone, deliberately, learning to be good company for herself, learning what she actually liked, not just what she thought would make others like her, learning to feel complete without someone else there to validate her existence. At first, it was terrifying. The silence felt like it would swallow her. But gradually, the silence became peaceful. She discovered she actually enjoyed her own company. She could make herself laugh. She could comfort herself when sad. She could create happiness without needing anyone else to provide it. And then, only then, was she ready to open her door again. But this time, from a completely different place. She wasn't inviting someone in to save her from loneliness. She was inviting someone in to share the fullness she'd already created. She wasn't looking for someone to complete her. She was looking for another, complete person to walk beside. The Buddha taught that both people in a relationship need to do this work. You need to heal yourself and get warm inside so you have something to share. The other person needs to do the same. Otherwise, what happens? Two lonely people trying to cure each other's loneliness. Two empty people trying to fill each other's emptiness. Two wounded people making each other's wounds worse. That's not love. That's mutual desperation. Real love happens when two people who have learned to be home for themselves choose to build something together. Not because they need to, but because they want to. Not to escape loneliness, but to share joy. This is why coming home to yourself has to happen first. Not because relationships aren't important. They're one of the most important things in life. But because you can't truly meet another person until you've learned to meet yourself. So, if you're listening right now and feeling like you're not ready, like you have too much work to do on yourself before you can be in a relationship, good. That awareness is the beginning of wisdom. Do the work. Build your home. Learn to generate your own light and warmth. Become someone you genuinely enjoy being with. And then, when you're ready, open your door. Not to just anyone, but to someone who's also done their work, who's also built their own home, who's also learned to be their own source of happiness. When two people like that meet, something beautiful becomes possible. Not perfect. Nothing in life is perfect, but real, solid, capable of weathering storms and holding joy and growing deeper over decades. That's the love worth waiting for. The love worth doing the hard work of coming home to yourself, to find Most relationship suffering comes down to this. We've forgotten how to truly listen, and we've forgotten how to truly speak. Not the surface kind of listening where you're waiting for your turn to talk. Not the performative kind of speaking where you're saying what you think you should say instead of what's actually true. Real listening, real speaking, the kind that creates genuine connection instead of the loneliness of two people talking past each other in the same room. The Buddha taught that right speech and deep listening are essential practices, not optional extras for people who have time for that sort of thing, but foundational skills without which love simply cannot survive. We live in a world that's lost this art. We talk constantly but say nothing real. We're surrounded by people but rarely feel truly met. We text 100 messages a day and still feel unheard, unseen, unknown. But the art can be recovered. The connection can be rebuilt, starting right now, with simple practices that will transform every relationship in your life. There are 3 sentences that can save your relationship. Not always, not magically, but more often than you'd think, these 3 sentences can stop a destructive cycle and create an opening for real connection. First sentence: my dear, I am suffering. Not you're making me suffer. Not this is your fault. Just a simple statement of truth. I am suffering right now. Most of us would rather die than admit this. We've been taught that vulnerability is weakness, that needing help is shameful, that we should be able to handle everything ourselves. So we suffer in silence. We retreat to our rooms and close the door. We build walls between ourselves and the person who could actually help us if we just let them in. A man told me he hadn't cried in front of his wife in 12 years of marriage. Not because he didn't feel sadness or pain. He felt it all the time. But he'd learned as a boy that showing vulnerability made you a target, made people lose respect for you, meant you were failing as a man. So he kept everything locked inside. And his wife, not knowing he was suffering, couldn't help. She thought he was cold, distant, emotionally unavailable. He thought she didn't care enough to notice his pain. Both of them were wrong, and both of them were suffering unnecessarily. Everything changed the night he finally broke. He was in so much pain, he couldn't hold it anymore. Through tears, he said, I am suffering. I don't know what to do. I need your help. And his wife, who'd been waiting 12 years to be let in, held him while he cried. That's the power of the first sentence. It opens the door. It lets your loved one know they're needed. It gives them a chance to show up for you in the way they've probably been wanting to all along. Second sentence: I am doing my best. This means you're not just dumping your suffering on them and expecting them to fix it immediately. You're practicing mindful breathing, mindful walking, doing what you can to take care of yourself. You're not making your suffering into a weapon or a manipulation. This sentence reassures your partner that you're taking responsibility for your own emotions, while still being honest about needing support. Third sentence, please help me. Simple, direct, humble. Not figure this out for me, not fix me. Just, I need your presence, your understanding, your love, right now. A woman told me these 3 sentences saved her marriage. She'd been on the verge of leaving because they fought constantly, both feeling misunderstood and attacked. She learned to write these sentences on a piece of paper and carry them in her wallet. Next time she felt that familiar rage rising, instead of attacking, she took out the paper and read the sentences to her husband. At first, he didn't know how to respond. Her anger he could fight against. It gave him something to push back on. But her vulnerability disarmed him completely. He sat down next to her. He took her hand. He said, "Tell me what you need." And they had the first real conversation they'd had in months. This is what the Buddha meant by right speech. Words that heal instead of harm. Words that create connection instead of division. Words that tell the truth without attacking. But right speech requires something difficult. You have to be willing to be vulnerable. You have to let go of pride. You have to admit that you can't do this alone, that you need the person you love, that you're human and hurting and hoping they'll help. Pride destroys more relationships than almost anything else. We'd rather be right than be connected. We'd rather win the argument than save the relationship. We'd rather protect our ego than open our heart. The Buddha taught that in true love, there's no place for pride. Only honesty, only vulnerability, only the willingness to say, "I'm suffering, and I trust you enough to let you see it." So memorize these 3 sentences. Write them down if you need to. And next time you're hurting, instead of attacking or withdrawing, try speaking from this place of honest vulnerability. You might be surprised by how your partner responds when you finally let them in. Now we come to the other half of connection, listening. Real listening, the kind that changes everything. Most of us don't actually listen. We wait for our turn to talk. We formulate our response while the other person is still speaking. We listen for what's wrong with what they're saying so we can correct them. We listen for the attack so we can defend ourselves. But we don't listen to understand. The Buddha taught that deep listening is one of the greatest gifts you can offer another person. To listen with your whole being, with no agenda, except to understand their suffering and help them suffer less. This is harder than it sounds. When someone you love is speaking, especially if they're upset, every instinct in you wants to interrupt, to explain, to defend, to correct their perception, to make them feel better immediately, so you don't have to sit with their discomfort. But that's not listening. That's self-protection disguised as helping. Real listening means you stay present even when what they're saying is hard to hear, even when they're wrong about some things, even when you want desperately to defend yourself or explain your side. You just listen. There was a couple at our practice center who hadn't really talked in years. They lived together, raised children together, functioned as a team, but they'd stopped truly communicating. We taught them a practice. Every evening, sit together for 15 minutes. One person speaks while the other listens, truly listens, with no interruption, no response, no fixing. The speaker was instructed to talk about their suffering, not blaming the other person, just sharing honestly what hurt. The listener was instructed to practice conscious breathing, in and out, staying present, keeping the heart open, listening only to understand, not to defend, not to argue, not to prepare a response. The first night was a disaster. The wife started speaking, and within 30 seconds was accusing the husband of things he'd done years ago. The husband tried to listen but couldn't stay present. He was too busy building his defense. But they kept practicing, and slowly, something shifted. As the wife felt genuinely heard for the first time in years, her accusations softened into vulnerability. As the husband practiced staying present without defending, he started to actually understand what she'd been trying to tell him all along. She wasn't trying to attack him. She was trying to reach him. She'd just never learned how to do it without weapons, because she'd never felt safe enough to put them down. And he wasn't refusing to hear her because he didn't care. He was defending himself because he felt constantly under attack and didn't know how else to survive. When they both learned to listen deeply, when they finally heard each other underneath the defenses and accusations, they rediscovered why they'd fallen in love in the first place. This is the power of deep listening. It's not passive. It's one of the most active, demanding practices you can do. You have to breathe consciously to stay present. You have to keep your heart open when everything in you wants to close down. You have to resist the urge to interrupt, explain, defend, or fix. You just listen, with patience, with compassion, with the genuine intention to understand this person you love, instead of being right about them. The Buddha said that sometimes the other person will say things based on wrong perceptions. They'll be incorrect about some facts. They'll misunderstand your intentions. They'll attribute motivations to you that aren't accurate. Let it go. Right now, your job is just to listen, to understand their suffering, their perspective, their experience, even if it's not objectively accurate. Later, not now, but later, you can gently offer information that might help correct their perception, but not in the moment when they're trying to share their pain. In that moment, you just hold space. You create a container safe enough for them to be fully honest. You give them the gift of being truly heard, maybe for the first time in their life. And here's what happens when you do this consistently. Your partner feels less alone. Their suffering begins to transform, just from being witnessed. The defensive walls start coming down because they're no longer necessary. And you discover something unexpected. When you truly understand someone's suffering, you naturally want to help them suffer less. Compassion isn't something you have to force. It arises naturally from understanding. So practice this today, not when there's a crisis or a fight, but right now. Ask your partner, is there anything you're carrying that you'd like to share with me? And then just listen for 10 minutes. No fixing, no defending, no advice unless they specifically ask for it. Just your full presence, your open heart, your genuine desire to understand. That's the gift. That's what changes everything. Here's something that will save you immeasurable suffering. Most of the time, when you're angry or hurt or convinced your partner did something to harm you deliberately, you're wrong about at least part of it. Not because you're stupid or delusional, but because we're all subject to wrong perceptions, all the time, about everything. The Buddha taught this with a simple example. You stand with friends watching the sunset. You're absolutely certain you're seeing the sun set below the horizon. But a scientist might tell you that the sun you're seeing already set 8 minutes ago. What you're seeing is just the image of the sun from 8 minutes in the past. We're subject to thousands of wrong perceptions like this every single day. Your partner doesn't call when they said they would. You think, they don't care about me, but maybe their phone died. Maybe they got caught in an emergency at work. Maybe they completely lost track of time, not because you're unimportant, but because they're human and imperfect. Your partner seems distant and cold. You think, they're pulling away from me. They're having an affair. They don't love me anymore. But maybe they're depressed. Maybe they're worried about something they haven't told you yet. Maybe they're dealing with pain that has nothing to do with you. Your partner criticizes something you did. You think, they're attacking me. They think I'm inadequate. They're never satisfied with anything I do. But maybe they're projecting their own insecurity. Maybe they learned this communication pattern from parents who never praised them. Maybe they're trying to help in the only way they know how, even if it lands badly. Wrong perceptions cause most of the suffering in relationships. So the Buddha gave us a practice. Whenever you have a strong perception about what someone did or why they did it, ask yourself this question. Are you sure? Just that. 3 words. Are you sure? Not to make you doubt everything or become paralyzed with uncertainty, but to create a small pause between perception and reaction. A moment where you can consider, is there another explanation I'm not seeing? A woman told me she spent 3 days convinced her husband was having an affair. He was coming home late, being secretive with his phone, avoiding eye contact. All the classic signs. She was ready to confront him, already planning what she'd say, how she'd leave, how she'd never trust anyone again. But she'd been practicing this question, are you sure? So before confronting him, she asked. Turns out he was planning a surprise party for her 40th birthday. He'd been secretive because he didn't want to ruin the surprise. He'd been distracted because he was nervous about getting all the details right. If she'd confronted him based on her wrong perception, she would have destroyed something beautiful. With her certainty, about something that wasn't even true. This doesn't mean you ignore real red flags or excuse genuine harmful behavior. It means you hold your perceptions lightly enough to ask, am I seeing this clearly, or am I seeing it through the lens of my own fear, past experiences, insecurities? The practice is simple but not easy. When you feel that surge of certainty, I know exactly what they meant. I know exactly why they did that. I know they're trying to hurt me. Pause. Take a breath. Ask yourself, are you sure? Then, instead of reacting from your perception, check it. Ask your partner, when you said that, what did you mean? When you did that, what was happening for you? Give them a chance to explain before you decide you know their motivations better than they do. Most of the time, you'll discover that what you were so certain about was at least partially wrong. And that discovery can save your relationship from a fight that didn't need to happen, words that didn't need to be said, wounds that didn't need to be opened. So practice this today. Notice your perceptions about your partner. Hold them lightly. Ask, are you sure? And watch how much suffering dissolves when you give up the need to be certain about things you can't actually know for sure. Let me teach you something that sounds simple but changes everything. How to hug. Not the quick pat on the back as you pass each other in the hallway. Not the distracted half embrace while you're thinking about what's next on your to-do list. But a real hug. A mindful hug. The kind that makes both people feel truly seen and held. The Buddha taught that we need to make each other real in our arms. Most of the time, the people we love are like ghosts to us. We see them without really seeing them. We touch them without really making contact. We're so lost in our own thoughts and worries that we forget to actually be present to the miracle of another human being right in front of us. Hugging meditation changes this. Here's how it works. Before you hug, stand facing each other. Take a moment to follow your breathing and establish your true presence. Let your mind settle into your body. Let your attention come fully into this moment, this person, this connection. Then open your arms and embrace them. First breath in and out. Become aware that you and your beloved are both alive. Right now, in this moment, both of you breathing, both of you here, both of you real. Second breath, in and out. Think about where you'll both be 300 years from now. Both gone, both returned to the earth. This moment together, temporary and precious, beyond measure. Third breath, in and out. Feel how precious it is that you're both still alive right now. That you get to hold each other. That your paths crossed in this vast universe, and you found each other. When you hug like this, the other person becomes real. Not an idea of a person, not the role they play in your life, but a living, breathing, temporary, precious human being who won't be here forever. A man told me he'd been married 23 years and had never really hugged his wife. They hugged, sure, quick embraces before leaving for work, routine gestures of affection, but he'd never been fully present for a single one of them. Then he learned hugging meditation. One evening after dinner, he asked his wife if they could try something. They stood facing each other. He felt awkward, self-conscious, wondering if this was silly, but he followed the practice. First breath, we're both alive. He felt her warmth, her solidity, her actual presence in a way he hadn't in years. Second breath, 300 years from now, his eyes filled with tears as he realized how much time they'd already wasted, how little time they had left. Third breath, precious that we're here now. He held her like she was the most valuable thing in the world, because in that moment, he realized she was. When they finally let go, both were crying. His wife said, "That's the first time I've felt you really hold me in 10 years. This is the power of presence, of actually being there, instead of just going through the motions. You don't need to wait for someone to leave on a trip to hug them like this. You don't need to wait for a special occasion. You can practice right now, today, making the people you love real in your arms." The Buddha said to invest 100% of yourself in everything you do. When you drink water, be completely present to drinking water. When you hug someone, be completely present to hugging them. This is how you stop sleepwalking through your relationships. This is how you wake up to the preciousness of ordinary moments. This is how you practice love as something alive and real, instead of a concept you think about while doing something else. So tonight, before bed, try this with your partner. Or if you're alone, try it with a friend, a family member, even a tree in your yard. Stand facing them, breathe together, hug with your whole being, not just your arms. 3 breaths, fully present, making them real, letting yourself be made real in return. And notice how something so simple, something you've done thousands of times without thinking, becomes profound when you bring your full presence to it. This is the lost art of connection, not something complicated or requiring years of training. Just the willingness to be here, now, fully present to the person in front of you. To speak honestly instead of defensively. To listen deeply instead of waiting for your turn. To question your perceptions instead of being certain you're right. To hold each other like you mean it. These simple practices, done consistently, will transform every relationship in your life. Not someday, not after you become a better person or find the perfect partner. Right now, with the people already in your life, with the love that's already here, waiting to be awakened through your presence. The Buddha said that nothing survives without food. Not plants, not animals, not even love. This might be the most important teaching about relationships you'll ever hear. If you don't know how to feed your love, it will die. Not because you're a bad person, not because you chose wrong, but because you let it starve. Most of us think we're feeding our love when actually we're poisoning it. We consume things that drain us, surround ourselves with influences that kill connection, fill our minds with toxic material, and wonder why our relationships feel depleted. The Buddha taught that there are 4 kinds of food we consume every day, 4 sources of nourishment that either strengthen love or weaken it. Edible food, what you put in your mouth. Sensory food, what you consume with your eyes, ears, and awareness. Volition, the intention and desire that drives you. And consciousness, your environment and the collective energy around you. Most people only think about the first one, but the other 3 are just as important, maybe more so. Let's look at what you're actually feeding your love. Your body is not separate from your mind. Your mind is not separate from your love. When you eat in a way that harms your body, you harm your capacity to love. When you respect your body through mindful eating, you strengthen everything: your energy, your patience, your ability to be present, your emotional stability. This isn't about following a perfect diet or never enjoying food. It's about recognizing that how you treat your body affects how you treat others. A man told me he was always exhausted and irritable with his family, quick to anger, impossible to please, constantly drained. He blamed his job, his kids, his wife's demands. Then someone asked him, "What did you eat today?" He listed it off. Fast food for breakfast, skipped lunch because he was too busy, 3 energy drinks, vending machine dinner while working late, every single day. His body was running on poison and stress, hormones. Of course, he had no patience for his family. Of course, everything felt overwhelming. He was trying to love people while actively destroying the vehicle through which love flows. He started one simple practice: eat 1 real meal a day with awareness. Not while working, not while scrolling his phone, just eating, tasting, being present to the nourishment entering his body. Within 2 weeks, his family noticed the difference. He was calmer, more present, less reactive, not because the external pressures changed, but because he stopped poisoning himself and started actually nourishing his body. The Buddha taught that eating with moderation is an act of love. Love for your body, which works so hard to keep you alive. Love for the earth, which grew the food you eat. Love for the people around you, who deserve your best energy instead of your exhausted, undernourished irritability. You don't have to become a health fanatic. You just have to pay attention. Notice how different foods make you feel. Notice when you're eating because you're hungry versus eating to numb emotions. Notice when you're feeding your body versus just filling a hole. And ask yourself, is what I'm consuming helping me love better or making it harder? Because if you can't respect your own body enough to feed it well, how can you respect someone else's body? If you're constantly depleted and running on empty, what do you have to offer? This is the first food. Simple, but profound. Treat your body like the sacred vessel it is. Now we come to something most people never consider: sensory food. Everything you consume with your eyes, ears, nose, and mind becomes part of you. Every image, every song, every conversation, every piece of media, it all enters your consciousness and shapes who you are. When you read a magazine full of anger and division, you consume that anger. When you watch violent shows before bed, you consume that violence. When you scroll through social media comparing yourself to others, you consume inadequacy and envy. And then you bring all of that to your relationship and wonder why you feel disconnected, anxious, irritable. The Buddha taught that if you consume toxic sensory impressions, they will feed your craving, anger, and fear. You become what you consume. A couple told me they spent every evening together, but felt completely disconnected. They'd come home from work, eat dinner in front of the television, watch shows until bedtime, then sleep. Every day the same routine. I asked them, "What are you watching?" Crime shows, murder mysteries, news programs cycling through disasters and outrage. 3 hours every night of violence, fear, anger, tragedy. Then they'd wonder why they couldn't sleep, why they felt anxious all the time, why they had nothing to talk about except complaints about the state of the world. I suggested they try something for 1 week. Turn off the television. Spend those 3 hours doing something else together. The first night was uncomfortable. They didn't know what to do without the screen to fill the space. But they sat outside and watched the sunset. They talked about things they hadn't discussed in years. They remembered why they liked each other. By the end of the week, both felt lighter, calmer, more connected. Not because they'd solved any major problems, but because they'd stopped consuming poison and started consuming beauty instead. This doesn't mean you can never watch television or read the news. It means being conscious of what you're feeding yourself. If you spend an hour scrolling through content that makes you feel inadequate, anxious, or angry, that's what you're feeding your love. You'll bring that energy to your partner whether you mean to or not. But if you set aside time each day to consume something beautiful, walking in nature, listening to music that moves you, reading something that inspires you, having a real conversation with someone you care about, that's what you'll have to offer. The practice is simple. Before consuming anything, ask yourself, will this nourish me or deplete me? Will this make me more capable of love or less? Then choose consciously instead of just defaulting to whatever's easiest or most distracting. Your attention is precious. Your consciousness is sacred. What you allow into it shapes everything about you, including your capacity to love. So be careful what you consume. Feed yourself beauty when you can. Protect your awareness from unnecessary poison. Give yourself the sensory nourishment that makes love possible. The third kind of food is volition, your intention, your desire, the motivation that drives everything you do. This is the energy that keeps you alive, the fuel that gets you out of bed each morning, the reason beneath all your choices. And most people have never examined it. What do you actually want? Not what you think you should want, not what your parents wanted for you or society expects, but deep down, in your most honest moments, what is your deepest aspiration? Because if your volition is toxic, it will poison everything else. If you're driven by the need to prove you're better than others, that competitiveness will seep into your relationship. If you're motivated by fear of failure, that anxiety will contaminate your love. If you want success at any cost, you'll sacrifice connection for achievement and wonder why you feel empty. The Buddha taught that you can practice developing a strong, positive volition. You can consciously choose what drives you. A woman told me she'd spent 20 years climbing the corporate ladder, sacrificing everything for the next promotion. Her marriage suffered. Her children barely knew her. Her health deteriorated. And when she finally reached the position she'd been working toward her whole life, she felt nothing. Empty, successful and alone. She asked me, what was it all for? I asked her, what was driving you? What was the volition beneath all those years of sacrifice? She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I wanted to prove I was worthy. To show my father I wasn't the disappointment he thought I was. To demonstrate to everyone who doubted me that they were wrong. That's what had been feeding her for 2 decades. Not love, not compassion, not genuine aspiration to help others or make the world better. Just the toxic need to prove her worth by achieving more than everyone else. And it had worked, in a way. She'd achieved everything she set out to achieve, but the volition itself was poisonous, so the success tasted like ashes. She started practicing a different kind of volition. Every morning, before the demands of the day crashed in, she would sit quietly and connect with a deeper intention. I vow to develop understanding and compassion in myself so I can bring more peace to the world. I vow to see the suffering in others and help relieve it when I can. I vow to create joy and connection instead of just accumulating achievements. At first it felt fake, like she was pretending to care about things that weren't really important to her. But she kept practicing, and slowly, her life began to shift. She started making different choices, turning down projects that required sacrificing her family, prioritizing connection over achievement, measuring success not by promotions, but by whether she was becoming more loving, more present, more helpful. This is what it means to feed your love with healthy volition. To consciously choose an intention rooted in compassion instead of fear, in contribution instead of competition, in love instead of the desperate need to prove something. So ask yourself right now, what's driving you? What desire is underneath all your daily activities? If you don't like the answer, you can change it. Not by force or willpower, but by practice, by consciously reconnecting each day with a deeper, truer, aspiration. When your volition is healthy, when you're driven by the intention to love and serve and grow, everything else becomes easier. Your relationship flourishes because you're no longer using it as a means to prove something or get something. You're just loving because that's what you've chosen to be about. The fourth source of nourishment is consciousness itself, both your individual consciousness and the collective consciousness of your environment. You become like the people you spend time with. You absorb the energy of the places where you live and work. You're shaped by the culture around you, whether you realize it or not. If you live in an environment where people are constantly angry and cynical, you'll become more angry and cynical. If you surround yourself with people who are bitter about relationships, you'll absorb that bitterness. If everyone around you treats love as a transaction or a competition, that will seep into your own relationships. But the opposite is also true. If you spend time with people who practice understanding and compassion, you'll naturally become more understanding and compassionate. If you're part of a community where people support each other's growth, you'll find it easier to grow. If you're surrounded by healthy relationships, your own relationship has a much better chance of thriving. A man told me his marriage was falling apart, and he didn't know why. He loved his wife. She loved him, but they couldn't seem to make it work. I asked him about their community. Who do you spend time with? Who are your closest friends? He listed them off. Every single one was divorced or in a miserable relationship. Every gathering turned into people complaining about their partners, making jokes about how marriage is a trap, reinforcing the belief that long-term love is impossible. He was swimming in toxic water and wondering why he kept getting sick. The Buddha taught that we need Sangha, community, a group of people who share the same aspiration, who support each other's practice, who remind us what's possible when we forget. This doesn't mean you abandon your friends who are struggling, but it means being conscious about whose energy you're absorbing and what kind of community you're building. The couple at our practice center who saved their marriage through deep listening practice didn't do it alone. They were surrounded by other couples who were also practicing, who could remind them what they were working toward when things got hard. They had a community that believed love was possible, that treated relationships as spiritual practice, that celebrated growth instead of cynically tearing each other down. That collective consciousness held them when their individual consciousness wanted to give up. So look at your environment. Look at who you spend time with. Look at what beliefs about love are floating in the air around you. Are you surrounded by people who believe relationships are hard work that's worth doing? Or people who think all relationships eventually fail? Are you part of a community that supports healthy love? Or are you isolated, trying to figure everything out alone? You can't control everything about your environment, but you can make choices. You can seek out people who are practicing what you want to learn. You can spend less time with influences that poison your view of love, and more time with influences that nourish it. A strong community is like a web that holds your relationship when individual strands start to fray. Without that web, even small winds can blow you apart. With that support, you can weather much stronger storms. This is the fourth food. Choose your environment consciously. Surround yourself with people who believe in what you're building. Let the collective consciousness support and nourish you instead of dragging you down. These are the four foods that nourish love or starve it. What you eat, what you consume with your senses, the intention that drives you, the environment and community around you. Most people never think about these things. They wonder why their relationships feel depleted, while unconsciously poisoning them every single day. But you can make different choices starting now. Feed your body with respect. Feed your mind with beauty. Feed your purpose with compassion. Feed your spirit with healthy community. When all four sources of nourishment are healthy, love doesn't just survive, it flourishes. It grows deeper over years instead of fading. It becomes stronger under pressure instead of breaking. It sustains both people instead of depleting them. This is how you feed love every single day, not through grand gestures or perfect behavior, but through countless small choices about what you allow to nourish or poison you. So pay attention. Notice what you're consuming. Choose consciously instead of automatically. Feed your love like the living thing it is. Everything we've explored becomes real through practice. Not theory, not good intentions, not understanding the concepts intellectually and then doing nothing with them. Practice. The Buddha didn't teach philosophy for people to think about. He taught practices for people to live. Tools you can use today, in the middle of your actual messy, complicated life, to transform suffering into peace and loneliness into connection. These aren't advanced techniques requiring years of training. They're simple, accessible practices that work if you actually do them. So here are the tools that will change your life. Not someday. Starting now. A mantra is a sacred phrase that can transform a situation. It doesn't have to be in Sanskrit or Tibetan. It can be in your own language, spoken from your heart. The Buddha taught 6 mantras for relationships. 6 phrases that, when spoken with genuine presence, can heal wounds, prevent fights, and restore connection. First mantra, I am here for you. These 4 words might seem simple, but they contain everything. When you say this to someone you love, you're making yourself truly present, not just physically in the room, but actually here, mind and body, together, attention, fully given. Most of the time we're physically present, but mentally, somewhere else. Thinking about work, scrolling our phones, planning what's next. Our loved ones can feel this absence, even when we're standing right next to them. But when you stop, breathe, gather yourself completely, and say, "Darling, I am here for you," something shifts. You become real to them. They become real to you. Life becomes real in that moment instead of something you're rushing through on your way to somewhere else. Try this today. Look at someone you love, take a breath, and say these words like you mean them. Watch what happens. Second mantra, I know you are there, and I am happy. This is recognition, acknowledgement, the practice of seeing and appreciating what's actually in front of you, instead of always looking for something better, something different, something more. You can practice this with the full moon, with the morning star, with magnolia flowers in bloom. And you can practice it with the people you love. When you look at your partner and really see them, not taking them for granted, not seeing them as a function they perform, but actually recognizing their presence as a gift, and you say, I know you are there, and I am happy, you create joy for both of you. We spend so much time wishing things were different that we miss what's already here. This mantra brings you back to what's real, what's present, what's worth celebrating right now. Third mantra, I know you are suffering. That is why I am here for you. This is the mantra for when someone you love is in pain. You don't have to fix anything. You don't have to make it better immediately. You just have to see their suffering and let them know they're not alone in it. When you're mindful, you notice when your loved one is suffering. Maybe they don't say anything. Maybe they're trying to hide it. But you see it in their eyes, their posture, the way they're holding tension in their body. Instead of ignoring it or hoping it goes away, you practice true presence. You sit close to them and say, Darling, I know you are suffering. That is why I am here for you. Just those words, spoken with genuine care, can relieve more suffering than 1,000 attempts to fix or explain or make it all better. Your presence is the gift. Your witness is the medicine. Fourth mantra, I am suffering. Please help. This might be the hardest mantra to speak because it requires complete vulnerability. When you're hurt, especially if you believe the person you love caused your hurt, everything in you wants to withdraw. You want to lock yourself in your room, nurse your wounds alone, punish them with your absence. But the Buddha taught that this is exactly when you need to go to them and ask for help. Not, you hurt me and you need to fix it. Not, this is your fault. Just, I am suffering and I need your help. A woman told me she spent 3 days in silent rage at her husband. He'd said something thoughtless that cut deep, and instead of telling him, she just froze him out. Cold silence, angry glances, the withholding of all warmth and connection. Finally, exhausted by her own anger, she remembered this mantra. She went to him and said, I am suffering. Please help me. He'd been waiting 3 days for permission to approach her. He sat down, took her hand, and said, Tell me what you need. That's the power of this mantra. It breaks through pride and opens the door to actual connection instead of silent warfare. Fifth mantra, this is a happy moment. Use this mantra to wake yourself up to the conditions of happiness that are already present. Maybe you're sitting together doing nothing special. Maybe you're walking hand in hand. Maybe you're eating a simple meal together. And you pause, look around, feel the moment fully, and say, "This is a happy moment." Not fake positivity, not pretending everything is perfect, just honest recognition that right now, in this ordinary moment, you have so much to be grateful for. We're always waiting for happiness to arrive in some big dramatic way. The perfect vacation, the ideal circumstances, the moment when everything finally lines up. But happiness is here now, if you have eyes to see it. You're alive. The person you love is alive. You're together. The sun is shining, or the rain is falling. You have food to eat and air to breathe. This mantra helps you stop missing your life while waiting for something better. Sixth mantra, you are partly right. This is the mantra of humility. When someone praises you, you can say, "You are partly right." You know you have good qualities, but you're not perfect. You don't let praise inflate your ego and make you forget your humanity. When someone criticizes you, you can also say, "You are partly right." You know you have weaknesses, areas where you need to grow. You don't need to defend yourself as if admitting imperfection would destroy you. This mantra keeps you balanced, not superior when praised, not destroyed when criticized, just human, containing both strengths and weaknesses, always learning, always growing. These 6 mantras are tools you can use every single day. Write them down if you need to. Keep them in your pocket. Practice them until they become natural. They're not magic spells that make problems disappear, but they're reliable practices that create openings for connection when connection feels impossible. Now let's practice something that will fundamentally change your relationship with yourself and everyone around you. This is metta meditation, loving kindness meditation, adapted from ancient Buddhist practice, but completely accessible to anyone right now. The practice begins with you, always with you. Find a comfortable position. You can sit, lie down, whatever allows you to be still and present. Close your eyes if that feels comfortable. Take a few deep breaths to settle your body and mind. Now, speaking either aloud or silently to yourself, begin with these phrases. May I be peaceful, happy, and light in body and spirit. Let that settle. Don't rush. Actually wish this for yourself. May I be safe and free from injury. Breathe with it. Mean it. May I be free from anger, afflictions, fear, and anxiety. Notice what arises when you say this. Don't judge it. Just notice. May I learn to look at myself with the eyes of understanding and love. This one might be hard. Most of us have spent years looking at ourselves with judgment and criticism, but practice anyway. May I be able to recognize and touch the seeds of joy and happiness in myself. They're there, even if buried under layers of suffering. They're there. May I learn to identify and see the sources of anger, craving, and delusion in myself. Not to judge them, to see them clearly so you can transform them. May I know how to nourish the seeds of joy in myself every day. This is the practice we've been talking about. Feeding the good, starving the harmful. May I be able to live fresh, solid, and free. Feel what this would be like. Alive, grounded, unbound. May I be free from attachment and aversion, but not be indifferent. This last one is important. Free doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care without clinging or pushing away. Practice this for yourself until it starts to feel genuine. Not just words, but actual wishes for your own well-being. Then, when you're ready, extend the practice outward. Choose someone you like, someone easy to love. Picture them clearly and repeat the phrases, substituting you for I. May you be peaceful, happy, and light in body and spirit. Then choose someone neutral, someone you see regularly but don't have strong feelings about. The person at the coffee shop, the mail carrier. Practice wishing them well-being. Then choose someone you love deeply. Your partner, your child, your closest friend. Really feel these wishes for them. And finally, this is the advanced practice. Choose someone who's difficult for you. Someone who's hurt you or who you find challenging. Can you wish them peace? Can you hope they find freedom from suffering? You don't have to like them. You don't have to excuse their harmful behavior. But can you recognize that they, too, are suffering, and that their freedom from suffering would benefit everyone? This practice transforms your heart gradually, naturally, not through force, but through the simple act of wishing well-being for yourself and others over and over until it becomes who you are. Here's a simple relationship health check. 20 questions to ask yourself occasionally, not to judge your relationship, but to bring awareness to what's actually happening. You don't need to answer them all right now. Just let them sit in your awareness. Are you in love? Are you still in love? Do you want to reconnect with the person who used to be the one you love? Do you think this person is happy? Do you have time for each other? Have you been able to preserve your true presence? Are you capable of offering freshness every day? Do you know how to handle suffering in yourself? Can you help handle suffering in the other person? Do you understand the roots of your own suffering? Can you understand suffering in the other person? Do you have capacity to help them suffer less? Have you learned to calm down painful feelings and emotions? Do you have time to listen to yourself and your deepest desire? Do you have time to listen to your partner and help them suffer less? Are you capable of creating joy for yourself? Can you help your partner create joy? Do you feel you have a clear spiritual path? Do you have peace and contentment within yourself? Do you know how to nourish your love every day? These aren't yes or no questions with right or wrong answers. They're invitations to look deeply, to be honest, to notice where you're strong and where you need to grow. Come back to these questions every few months. Watch how your answers change as you practice. Finally, some simple rituals to weave these practices into your daily life. Morning intention. Before the day's demands crash in, take 2 minutes to set your intention. What kind of person do you want to be today? How do you want to show up in your relationships? Evening flower watering. Before bed, tell your partner one thing you appreciate about them. Just one genuine thing. Water the flowers instead of focusing on weeds. Weekly deep listening. Set aside time each week where you sit together and really listen to each other. No fixing, no defending, no advice, unless asked. Just presence and understanding. The practice of reverence. Treat your partner with the respect you'd give an honored guest. Even after years together, they still deserve your full attention and care. These rituals might seem small, but they're what keep love alive over decades. Not grand gestures or perfect behavior, but consistent small acts of mindfulness and care. The Buddha taught that transformation can happen very quickly when you practice sincerely. You don't need years of training. You just need to begin. So begin today. Choose one practice from this section. Just one, and actually do it. Not perfectly, not with complete understanding of all the nuances. Just do it with sincerity and see what happens. These practices work, not because they're magic, but because they align you with how love actually functions, through presence, understanding, compassion, and genuine care. When you practice consistently, you stop being someone who thinks about love and become someone who lives it. And that changes everything. So here we are, at the end of this journey together. You now know that love isn't something that just happens to you. It's an art you can learn, a practice you can cultivate, a capacity you can develop day by day. Your heart can expand from a cup into a river. You can learn to generate your own happiness instead of demanding it from others. You can understand suffering deeply enough to transform it. You can speak and listen in ways that create genuine connection. None of this requires perfection. You'll make mistakes. We all do. But mistakes become compost for growth when you meet them with awareness instead of shame. Start small today. Choose one practice. Maybe the 3 sentences when you're suffering. Maybe hugging with presence. Maybe one moment of genuine listening. Just one thing. Build from there. And remember, you're not alone in this. Wherever you're listening from right now, whether it's morning light or deep night, whether you're feeling hopeful or heartbroken, you're part of a global community, learning to love more skillfully. May your heart expand like a river, capable of holding everything with grace. May you water the flowers in yourself and in those you love. May your love bring healing to everyone it touches. Take one more breath with me now. Let it out slowly. And know that every moment is a new chance to begin again. Until we meet again, may you be peaceful, happy, and deeply loved. Thank you for walking this path together.